Hi, Leanne Donahue-Tamplin here. Today I'm interviewing Janet Beckers, and she's the founder of a training and mentoring organisation that helps women develop and grow profitable businesses with a particular focus on online businesses. She's going to talk us through how she went from a business that was failing to creating a business and lifestyle that she now calls success. This is the second half of my interview with Janet, and I'll come back at the end of this interview and talk to you about the strategies and skills that she used to create that success so that you can apply those in your own life. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and I'll come back and talk to you again soon. Thank you.
I think one of the things that made a big difference to my sense of joy is I started living my life by the mantra, health before 10, wealth after 10. And so what that does is, for me, up until 10 a.m., I give myself permission to do anything that is going to be good for my physical health and my mental health. So I don't make appointments for clients and colleagues, any of those sorts of things, until after 10 a.m. And so I will either go and meet friends and go swimming and then go for a coffee, or I'll go for a run and then I'll meet somebody else for coffee. I'll go kayaking. You know, I'll be kayaking out in the ocean or on a lake with my husband or with friends, and that's okay. You know, it's happening midweek because I know that I've given myself permission that mentally that's my time. And if I start my day off that way, then I can feel the discipline that goes with getting up and doing something anyway carries through to the discipline I do in my day. And I also have connected with nature. I've connected with friends. And there's some days where I don't do that, but I have made the conscious decision that this other thing is important. And those are days where I actually, because I'm part of I have my own mentors, I have my own masterminds that I'm part of, and they're in the United States. So for me to take part in those calls means I'm getting up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. But for me, that's my personal growth as well, which comes as part of my mental health. So as soon as I started doing that, it was quite a few years ago now, it really freed me up from that thing of, because sometimes when you're playing, you're thinking, oh, I should be working. And then sometimes when you're working, you're thinking, oh, I should be playing. It's the same you have, you know, as a mother, you know, when the kids were young. When you're working, you go, oh, I should be with my babies. I should be spending time with them. When you're spending time with them, you're going, oh, I've got all this stuff I should be doing in the business or at work. Whatever it is, that's your sense of responsibility. So for me, that puts a boundary. So you have to set your own boundaries on your own time and what you will accept in those different sort of boundary times, so that you make sure that you get the balance without having any of the kind of you know, the guilt crap that can go through your head.
I think it kind of gives you permission, doesn't it? It's kind of, you know, I'm allowed to have this time instead of those questions going on in your head about guilt. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, the boundary time. I think that's good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I did this when my children were younger. When I started my first business, they were preschool age. When I started the first business, which was my art gallery, don't do that. And they, you know, because they're little, you know, you're always torn between wanting to be with them, but you're going to go crazy if you're with them all the time. You know, you want the mental stimulation. And for me, it was building a business from scratch. And then I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to document the number of hours on my calendar that I spend on being a mother, running a house, in my business, on myself. And I color-coded my calendar. And I looked across it for a 2-week period and I went, you know what, pink, which was time for me, man, there's not much pink in there, I can tell you. And what I did realize was that for the business and time with the family, they were pretty even. So I thought, you know what? Lighten up on yourself, girlfriend. They're all getting looked after. You're not. So something there's got to change.
You do a really good job with that self-reflection, don't you? you know, you're very good at kind of looking back at yourself and saying what's going on and taking stock. So, you know, there's a lot of things you do that are like that. Was that something have you always been like that, or did you learn to do that?
Definitely, I didn't. I mean, I'm not quite sure what age I probably started doing that. I think one of my biggest lessons in doing this was I got very, very sick with an autoimmune disease.
Right.
And it came from spending a year backpacking around South America, you know, in really budget conditions. So, of course, I got every bug going around this, you know, that there was around. And it did something to my body. My body kind of attacked itself. It's a long story on its own, but you know, there was periods of time where I was well, and there were periods of time I was very, very sick. But after a while, it came back and it didn't go, and I kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And what it was is I had this reactive arthritis, Reiter's syndrome. So I would get like a chronic fatigue. My knees would swell up. I had to use a walking stick. You know, my teeth would hurt. Wow. My spine would hurt. I would have this swelling all through my body. And the doctors had basically said, look, you know, sorry, there's nothing else we can do. You know, the herbalists had said there's nothing else we can do. You know, it's you're always going to be having this, and it will come and go. But there's nothing else you can do. You probably have to go on prednisone for the rest of your life. So I went, no way is that happening. So I started doing a lot of research into the connection between emotions and your health. And I started keeping a dream diary, which is interesting. Once you set yourself you're going to remember your goal, your dreams, you can. Right. So every morning I would document my dreams, what was happening in them. I would be, you know, keeping a calendar of my symptoms next to the dreams, next to what was, as a way of tapping into my subconscious, really.
Yeah.
And once I was able to really identify certain emotions that were associated with an exacerbation of the symptoms, I could then, I really mastered using meditation to be able to imagine myself healthy, to be able to make those emotions unimportant anymore. And once I could do that through meditation and my subconscious, I could do that when I wasn't meditating. And once I mastered that, which did not take that long, the symptoms went.
Wow.
That was years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's pretty, I've got a whole chapter of it in my book.
Wow.
Yeah, it's I call it the red dragon walking stick, because I remember my mother ducking into this shop when I was really having a lot of trouble walking, and I was in quite a bit of pain, but we were just Christmas shopping. And she ducked into one of those $2 shops, and she came out with this red walking stick with a dragon's head with a marble in it. It was so ugly. And she gave it to me. I was so incredibly grateful for that walking stick. But when I realised that I had basically, you will never cure yourself of an autoimmune disease. It is always going to be there. But I've had a couple of occasions when I could feel my knee start to swell, and I just went straight into a whole day. Just all I did was visualise it going, and it's gone. And so that red walking stick, when I realised that first time that, you know what, it's gone, and I'm never going to need this again. My kids and my husband, we all went out in the backyard, and we had one of those really old-fashioned clotheslines that were like a big wooden pole that had a wire that would go to the other end. And I got this walking stick. Everybody stood around me, and I smashed it to smithereens against that clothesline. And because I was never going to need it again, and I didn't want to give it to somebody else, because I didn't want to give them the bad, the energy that was associated with that walking stick. And so I think that process of learning as much as I could about how to tap into my subconscious, how to manipulate it, and then how to use that so to make changes to myself. I think ever since the skills that I learned through that, I use constantly now. that was probably about 7 years ago. I've just used that constantly in everything in my life. So I do self-reflect a lot. I'm very, very aware of what I'm feeling in my body. I very often am almost like there's another little Janet always looking at this Janet, observing, you know, what is she thinking? What is she feeling? So like I will go, like for example, I recently was going through a process of doing a different sort of launch method, you know, and applying it in my business, you know, for a program that you joined, Leanne. And so for me, it was pushing myself out of my comfort zone because it was a new way of doing things for me. And so I was very, very aware the whole time. So I thought, you know what, you know, every single thing that required, you know, a special, like a web address or a page, you know, that had like, that other people may not know what it was going to be, or anything that was on my drafts, everything had the initials BGP. And most people would not even know what it was, but it was important for me because it was saying big girl panties. So because I was going, you know what, this is for me, it's big girl panties, you know, it's you're going to invest a lot of money into this and a lot of time, but it's going to work. And so put big girl panties on, girlfriend. And so that's this little voice up here talking to Janet down here. And you know, put your big girl panties on, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, be aware of, you know, are you starting to feel a bit doubtful, or are you starting to feel nervous? Well, what is that? What have we got to change in your mind to do that? You know, just so I think it's a constant process. And if you're not in touch with what you're feeling, you know, your emotions in your body are whatever you're feeling in your body is a really good sign about something else that's happening in your subconscious. So trust your body. Just trust it that, you know what, if I'm starting to feel tense, or if I'm starting to feel nervous in my tummy, what is actually happening in my mind? Just take that moment to reflect. Go somewhere quiet. You know, listen to a guided meditation. Get out in nature and just get in touch to wherever it is physically that you're feeling that, and what comes into your mind, so that you can tap into that connection in your subconscious. And you've got the ability to change it.
I think what's really powerful about what you're saying is that you learnt that process through adversity. You know, you know, you may have already had some of it, but you refined it, I guess. Adversity taught you how to do that. Now I'm gonna move this along because I know we're going to run out of time, so I want to go on to the next question. The next one is about character strengths. I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to tell me what character strengths you think within you drew on the most to get yourself to this point. So I'll read you some as an example. It's all kinds of things. So good judgment, courage, perseverance, teamwork, self-discipline, forgiveness, connections to others, sense of humour or spirituality, something like that. Are there particular strengths you think you drew on?
Yeah, sure. Wow, all of the above. I think the thing that makes a big difference between the people who give up and those who persist through, persistence is a huge one. You know, so many people are this far from the finish line and it gets hard and they just stop. So persistence is important, but in order to have that persistence, you also have to continually be feeding back so that you've got a self-belief, so that you're trusting in yourself. And so it was interesting that you said forgiveness. I think that was a really important one for me, is forgiving myself for what I saw as not having been success in the past. So in order to say, well, you know what, there's been things that have been stuff-ups in the past, but I forgive myself for that, and I'm taking the lesson and I'm going to use it in the next one. And you know what, probably two other ones out of that from that list that you've said is definitely connections with others, communicating with others. You can't do these things alone. You can't. And really, for me, it's fun. You know, like, if I stop having fun in what I'm doing, I'm out of here, babe. So even though it sounds crazy that, you know, sometimes there'll be things where, you know, it's there's a challenge that's happened, you know, where I'll go, well, this is the month where I think that's it, I want to quit. Absolutely everything's gone wrong with technology and it's my responsibility to find the solutions. But at the same time, there is a fun involved because it's going to, you know, am I capable of doing that? Yeah, I think I can do that. So I can do this with a sense of enjoyment and challenge and celebrate. So making things fun is your responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's nobody else's responsibility to make it fun for you. It's yours to find the fun in things.
I really love that. That's great. Now, I want to ask you then as a final question.
Yep.
What do you have to do now to maintain where you're at? What, you know, are there things you're doing all the time to make sure you don't slip back to that time when it's been really hard?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, for me, business development is personal development. They're just one and the same thing. Just business development is one of the fastest tools in order to develop personally. So I am constantly working on myself. I'm constantly learning. You know, like at the moment I'm doing an NLP certification. I mean, I don't need an NLP certification, but I'm learning a lot about my mind. I'm learning a lot about the people who I help so I can help them better. So I will always be on a journey to learn more about the way that I think and the way people around me think. So, you know, that's one of the core things is personal development just does not stop. The more you get to know yourself, the better you're going to be and the happier you're going to be and the greater your level of success is going to be. I would say that that's probably one of the big ones. And the other one is, you know, just reminding myself that I really, it's just to simplify that success is actually not that complicated. And the more complicated you make what you're wanting to do, the further you get away from success. So for me, my constant thing that I'm doing is what can I take away? What can I do to simplify? How can I simplify my offerings? How can I simplify my life? How can I simplify the way I communicate? How can I simplify my message? That's a big one, is constantly paring it down.
There's definitely a process of self-reflection or even business reflection that you're doing, isn't there, on a regular basis? Taking, you know, that taking stock process of where am I at? Am I making it too complicated? You know, am I pushing myself a little bit so I'm outside my cut? You know, you're always reflecting, changing, enhancing with what you're doing. You know, it's a big part.
I think there is a big tendency, or there's a big temptation for people that as you reflect, a lot of times people will be analysing what they're doing in their business, analysing their own happiness, because that's why I'm doing what I do. And a lot of times there is a tendency, and hands up, this was my tendency for years, is what can I add to make this more valuable? Whereas what I've really come to recognise in the last couple of years is what can I take away to make this more valuable? What can I take away so that I can not overwhelm people? Because there's a big fine line between over delivery and overwhelm. And that can also be for yourself, you know, that you can be going, you know what, I'm just going to do this for me, and I'm going to get things, you know, I'm going to accumulate. Whereas in fact, sometimes that can actually just cause you overwhelm and stress. So just, you know, for me, that's a really important thing, because I can tend to, you know, I just want to live life to the full, and sometimes that can almost be like a gluttony thing, you know, to keep on wanting to live it to the full. So the real discipline is, you know, simplify. Yeah, simplify will lead to success.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Janet. That's been awesome. Loved hearing all that information.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed. I don't often get to talk about these sorts of things, so.
All right, thank you. Just going to reflect on the strategies that Janet has been talking about in this second half of her interview. Firstly, she gave herself permission to take care of herself. She said she'd been living with a philosophy of health before 10, wealth after 10 in the morning, and that allowed her to focus on herself before 10 o'clock. She didn't start any work, business-oriented things until after 10. So that included social connections, family relationships, having fun, doing something physical, doing exercise, anything that was good for her mental and physical health. She also accesses mentors and mastermind groups and gets support from colleagues and other people doing the same work that she's doing. She said that that's invaluable. She also talked about, I know in the first half about her interview, about her connections to her own community and how she gets a lot of support from them as well. She said that she reflects on her own business and herself constantly. So she's always looking at what's going on in her own mind and her own body and tuning into that and then addressing that as needed. But she's also doing that with her business. Am I on track? What is my new focus? What do I see as success now? She's looking at that, reflecting on it and adjusting it as needed. Some of the strengths she said she used were persistence, particularly. She said that's the difference between someone who fails and someone who succeeds. It's simply persistence. She said she felt that believing in herself and trusting herself were critical to her succeeding, that she had to forgive herself for not being a success in the past, and that was a big deal for her. And then also just her connections with others, which I've already mentioned. She also said that business development is personal development and that you can't run a business without developing as a person, looking at yourself, learning more about yourself, extending yourself. And it's much more than just a job. One of the key things she said, or one of the key messages she said she has for other people running their businesses, and something that she's trying to adopt in her own career or her own business more, is that she said, and I quote, the real discipline for success is to simplify your message, simplify your offerings, and simplify your life. And I think that's a really key component of what Janet does on an ongoing basis. She takes the time to self-reflect on what's going on for her own body and mind and what's going on for her business, and then she just adjusts those, but in a simple kind of flowing way rather than a more, stop-start way. There was a real flow to how she was describing what she does with her business. All right, hope you can apply some of those things to your own business and your own life, and look forward to seeing you again soon.